Hello, everybody. Welcome. Magovanen. Ellen Sila Lumen Omindielvo. And all of the other fun elven greetings from Tolkien. Hope everybody's having a good day. Welcome to History of Middle-earth Part 3. This is the third installment of a really long series. I have no idea how many episodes of this we'll be doing, but I know it won't be ending anytime soon. If my progress thus far gives us any sort of, notification of how long this would take, we're probably going to have something like maybe 30, 35, 40 episodes of this, which would carry us so far into the future. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Shane McInnes. I am normally here on Twitch doing history streams. I teach history at college for a profession. But I'm a giant Tolkien fan. He is one of my favorite writers. I have read Tolkien stuff for a very long time, since I was a very young little sprout, well before my coming of age at 33. So my viewers in my history stream figured out that I was a giant Tolkien fan, and they asked me to do History of Middle-earth, which is not necessarily, really what I would do in a normal situation, but we decided to make it a goal. So at 300 followers, we did our first one. I ran a community goal for donation points to get the second one. And here we sit, passing 400 followers to have another. Didn't realize today was History of Middle-earth stream. Going to shower real quick since you were lazy. Hey, Kyle. Gisuli on Magovanen, my friend. So, yeah, here we are. Tolkien time. So, in the first episode of History of Middle-earth, we covered very basically the creation of basically what exists, Ea, the universe. And we talked about all the different gods and demigods and their likenesses and their associations. And in the second stream, we talked about them fashioning the earth, which is called Arda, and big wars between them and the big bad guy who constantly kept trying to destroy their stuff. There was a lot of fighting going on in the last one, and there'll be some continuation of that in this stream. And the puppy just came in. Could we get the dog out of the room, please? Because she's going around like, go. Hold on. Ladies and gents, hold on just a second. Oh, good gracious. So the dog just got a bath. And when the dog gets a bath and she comes out of the bath, she runs around like a little demon and is effectively impossible to control. And I did not know that the demon was going to be released at the beginning of a stream. So, Joey, yes, I have turned off point redemptions for this particular stream after the first History of Middle-earth stream that I had planned for about a 2-hour stream, and the point redemption pushed that into almost a 3.5-hour stream. So if you have questions or you want to know stuff, by all means, bring that in. But the impressions and the ranking 3 things that it started to really eat in, and my rear end can only handle so much of sitting in the chair here. So yeah, the puppy, and if she dries off and acts like an actual puppy instead of some sort of possessed being, we might bring her back in at the end. She's a wet, sopping mess right now anyway. I would not want her around all of the streaming technological material right now in the first place. So, okay, yeah. So, it is time to start talking history of Middle Earth. And where we left off, we left off with the awakening of the first children of Iluvatar, who are the Elves. And I do want to make an announcement sort of off the top here, that I'm leaving some stuff out of this discussion. There's some things that happen concordantly, but we're going to cover that in a second stream. Most specifically, during this period of time, the dwarves are going to wake up as well, and they're going to start building their cities and expanding their kingdoms. And this was already going to be a very, very long stream, and had I added in all of the dwarven stuff, it would have probably added another 30 minutes or so to the stream. So in an attempt to kind of hold on this in a bit of a more narrow fashion, we're going to cover the dwarven stuff in probably stream 4. So who is the shrine behind me for? It's not really a shrine. It's it's a dresser that's covered with a sheet. Let me get my head out of the way. And it's really just there to hold up those lights. But I've got some binoculars. My wife and I do bird watching, so there's some binoculars right there. That's easy for us to grab on the way out the door. That is, that's actually a funny little joke. They, for a little while, there were a line of plushies for infectious diseases, and one of my friends gave me that, which is a plushie chlamydia. So now he jokes that he gave me chlamydia. This is a stuffed plushie for Goose, as one of the characters from the comic book Saga, written by Brian Vaughan. Excellent book. This little guy is a... where am I going? So this guy is a little, probably Mayan household deity. We'll be showing him off in a couple of streams. And these are a couple of boxes of artifacts that I have recovered and legally returned to the United States. So it's not actually a shrine, it's just a thing. And there's a computer that I'm building and some comic books that I need to sort through, and just some random stuff that's in the corner of the room that I should probably put up. So now that we've gone through all of the random stuff behind me and not talked about Tolkien at all, let's, I guess, kind of get on. Let me catch up with chat. Gaming went okay. It's not a shrine. Okay, so we were talking about what we are covering and what we're not covering. So if you were showing up today hoping to hear about dwarves, I do apologize. Don't think that we are going to completely leave dwarves out. We will definitely come back and talk about Durin, who lived so long people thought that he got reincarnated 7 times, and Belagost and Telkar and all those cool dwarves that did really cool stuff. So we are not forgetting the dwarves. We're just trying to narrow down the target for today. All right, so we left off talking about the elves. And the elves are going to... that's the wrong button. Boom, there we go. The elves are going to wake up around the shores of a lake. And the lake is called Quibienen. And it is going to be way back in kind of the deep times. This is something that is foretold. The Valar, who are the gods of Middle Earth, know that the elves are going to be waking up. They know that the time is coming soon, but they don't know exactly when. So this is a painting of the shores of the lake, whereby which the elves first awoke. And again, it's called Cuivienen, which is way off center. I don't know what's up with that. Is there stuff in front of this? No. Okay. Well, that's funky. Now I'm wondering what's going on with the old chatter here. Huh. Let me poke at this. Now I'm doing stuff that I shouldn't be doing because I'm OCD about having stuff centered. Dum-da-dum-da-dum-dum. Here's the part of the stream where Shane fixes his layout. This is pro streamer stuff right here, bud. Let me tell you. This is too much. I don't know what I'm doing. We're just going to have to go with it here in a second. This is me being OCD, and I'm not going to be pleased with it until it's perfect. Okay, that's better. Whatever. We'll just go with it. I know it's not centered. That bothers me. And that's supposed to be an E. Cuivienen. It's a lake. Elves wake up. They start walking around and doing some stuff. And the elves, when they first wake up, are only going to be 6 in number. Or so the legend goes. And this is where we get into a little bit of Tolkienception, if you will. Of course, everything that he wrote was a fantasy story, and he wrote the Silmarillion in the version of a myth, for the most part. And inside of this, there are legends. So the people of the elves, who are going to be kind of the dominant discussion of today, have stories about how they first woke up. And whether or not these are accurate, Tolkien didn't even know, because he wrote it so that it was vague. Because, way to go, Tolkien. He's a guy that just really enjoys adding things that are I guess vague. I'm getting very upset at Word right now. Okay, so the first 2 elves that wake up are Emin and Eminye. And this is a guy and a girl. And the interesting part here is that if we look at, according to what Tolkien gave us, if we look at their names, Emin and Eminye basically means one. So they are the first. And they form a group later on that we'll talk about. So Emin and Eminye. And then there is Tata and Tatie. Okay, guess what that means? 2. And then there is Enel and Enelye. And guess what that means? 3. Right. So what does that all have anything to do with anything? Well, this adds to the whole Tolkien might be writing a myth within a myth thing. he's writing a folklore of a people that he's made up. That's deep. That's like multiple levels deep. And of course you can't see that because it's too big. So these are the first three groups of elves: the Minyar, the Tatar, and the Nelyar. And so the first three there are pairs. Emin and Eminye wake up first, Tata and Tatier wake up second, and Ellen and Elie wake up third. And they hang out by the lake for a little while, but then they start wondering what else might be out there. So they start wandering around. And as they wander around the area surrounding the lake, they find other groups. And not just like other pairs, they find big groups. Well, I guess big is an operative word here. Emin and Eminye, who are the leaders of the Minyar, add 12. So there are now 14 of those. The Tatar add 54, and the Nelyar add 72. So always here divisible by the pairs. This whole pairs thing is a big deal for Tolkien. And this is supposed to probably play back to the idea that elves are in balance with the world. They're always supposed to be kind of like this outgrowth of the world itself. So you don't have odd numbers of elves at the beginning in their story. Now, there is a bit of some contention here because Emin and Eminye, who woke up first, have the smallest group. There are only 14 of the Minyar. And Emin feels like he might have been sort of gypped a little bit. And I shouldn't say that. He's been cheated a little bit. Apologies for that slip of the tongue there. He's been shorted. He has not had his due. So, yeah, he gets a little bit upset, and the Minyar wander around a little bit, and there's starting to be a little bit of not a rift, but they start becoming a little bit different than the rest of the elves, and that's okay. But if we want to look at these, here is the first 6, and you can see that they are here in their pairs. They are out among the stars, walking through the woods, looking at cool stuff that's out in the great beyond. And again, I do want to remind everybody that there are very few actual approved images for a lot of this material. So the stuff that I'm showing you should not be considered exact. If you have a vision of this in your brain that's different, you go for it. It's perfectly fine. Because, well, just to be honest, nobody really knows what this stuff looks like because Tolkien himself was not a big illustrator. So what are they doing around the lake? Well, they're hanging out, and they decide that they need to know how to talk to each other. So they create a language. And in their language, they begin to give names to things. They start naming not only themselves, but, the stuff around them. And they name their race the Quindi. So this is the Elven word for elf. Quindi. They also develop mathematics, which I know everybody was super excited about. Elven math, woo! Because there were only 144 elves awake at that point, that was the highest number that they had in their mathematic structure. And their mathematical base was 12 instead of 10. The origin of Wendy's. Quindi. Fresh, never frozen. Not yet, anyway. They had not passed the churning ice. That's probably a couple of streams from now. So they are, again, they're mostly peaceful. The Minyar with Emin and Eminye are a little bit far afield quite a bit. They do continue to go out searching, looking for other elves to try to increase their size, because again, even though Emin was the first to wake up and was sort of counted the greatest amongst them, his group was the smallest, and that kind of irked him a little bit. So in the midst of this sort of ranging around, going around and looking for other elves, well, something bad happens. Because, again, we all know that the Valar, who are, again, the gods of Middle-earth, understood that at some point in the near future, the elves would be waking up. And foremost among the lookers for these elves was this guy. This guy is Morgoth. He's the big bad, and he was super interested in finding the first children before the other gods. At this point, he was living in a big fortress up in the northern part of Middle-earth that was hidden from the Valar, the rest of the good gods. He was sending out his spies, which were in the forms of evil spirits, to scout out the land, and he was looking for the elves. And he found them first. And this is not going to be very good for the Quindi, because when Morgoth finds them, he decides that the first thing he needs to do is try to keep them from spreading. He wants to try to contain them because he's the only of the gods that understands where they are. And of course, he wants to have his purpose done in them. So he sends his evil spirits to begin tormenting the elves. And this is a pretty brutal period of time for them because they don't know what this is. Remember, this is basically not even a whole generation before or since they had even awoken. They did not know much of what was in the world at all. So these weird spirits are going to go amongst the elves, and Morgoth is going to find and capture some of them. And this is going to be a bad thing, because when Morgoth captures some of these elves, he's going to bring them back to his strongholds, and he's going to begin twisting them. And this is where we get orcs. Orcs were bred by Morgoth from these original elves. If we go back to the first and second histories of Middle-earth, if you want to go back and watch those, they're saved in the VOD. But Morgoth cannot create things out of nothing. He doesn't have the access to something called the flame imperishable. This is basically what makes things sentient. So he can create stuff out of other things, but he cannot create sentient beings. And that really made him mad. He wanted to be the greatest and the most powerful being in all of creation, and to do that, he needed to be able to create stuff. Well, he couldn't. So what he did very frequently was find stuff that the other gods had created and then twist it to his own purpose. Hence, capturing elves, torturing them, and effectively making the race of orcs. How this happened exactly is not completely known. Tolkien did not give us a whole ton of information about the exact process of this, whether or not it was, magical or scientific. We don't really know. But what we do know is that this is going to be the reason why orcs and elves hate each other so much, because they're basically the opposite side of the coin of each other. Whereas elves are very much in harmony with the world, orcs are, of course, going to destroy things and ruin things and foul things, and that's kind of their nature, because that's the nature of Morgoth, like servant, like master. So this is a big, bad mess, because now the Quindi, the elves, have even more things to worry about. And, well, how do you handle that? How How do you even begin to protect yourselves from things that you don't understand? Well, it just so happens that there is help on the way. And the help is in the form of the Valar Orome. Orome was one of the most powerful of the Valar. We can see him here riding on his spectral steed, slaying an evil spider kind of creature thingy. Orome was a hunter, and he was the greatest hunter of the gods, and he very frequently made hunting trips over into Middle-earth, leaving the Blessed Realm where the gods lived, in part to slay the servants of Melkor, the bad guy. Melkor and Morgoth, by the way, are the same people. Morgoth is later as a name that he picks up later, and I should be calling him by Melkor at this point because he is still technically Melkor. Evil spider thingy is the official term. Absolutely. That's a direct translation from the original Elven. So if you translate Elven into English, you get evil spider thingy. So Orome goes out hunting, and in one of his forays, he makes it really, really far over into Middle-earth, and he discovers the elves himself. And there is going to be a moment here where things get a little dicey, because he goes, "Oh, hey, check it out! I've found the elves. It's time. I need to go talk to them and meet them, and I need to help them and do what I can." So here comes Orome, who, by the way, is in stature significantly larger than your average elf. This guy is, probably 20-something feet tall. He's a god. Riding on a horse, that's enormous. And so he just rides up and he's like, "Hi, I'm Orome. You should come hang out with me and we'll be friends." And first off, they can't understand him because they don't speak the same language. And second, he's carrying giant weapons. He's in armor. He's on the back of a horse. That freaks the elves out. And they think this is the guy that is doing all of the tormenting. So they basically initially blame Orome for all of the stuff that Melkor had done. This is the guy that's hunting down our fellows who went out into the woods and were never seen again. This is the guy that's sending all of these evil spirits to chase us in the woods and stuff. So, yeah, it's a kind of a scary moment. And Orome's like, but no. I'm a friend, and he stays a while to try to learn how to communicate with them, and eventually they do figure out how to understand themselves. And part of this, of course, is because Orome is a god and has, a lot of knowledge and power and such. So he starts calling them by a new name, a name that was given to them by the gods, the Eldar, or the first children, or the first beings, which is something that had been sort of foretold by Eluvatar, the highest creator god, in the period before there was time, that these would be the first children. So Orome is super stoked. He is very excited, and he goes all the way back to the Blessed Realm, the place of Aman, and he starts talking to the gods. And he's like, "Look, here's the deal. Knowledge is power." Do. Exactly. What's up, Tuna? So when Orome gets back, some of the gods are a little bit wishy-washy. They're like, I don't know. So Orome is going to basically use kind of the final, I guess, argument weapon, which is summoning them to a conclave. There is a part of Aman in the sort of the palace area where the gods lived, and it's called Mahanaxar, which translates from their language into Ring of Doom. And this is not like doom as in you're all going to die, but this is like a fateful place where we make really big decisions. And so he he brings all of the Valar together in Mahanaxar, the Ring of Doom, and he says, look, Melkor's over in Middle-earth. He's tormenting these elves. He's already killed some of them. He's already abducted some of them. We don't know where some of them are. And we need to go protect the Eldar, because that's one of our purposes. We've been waiting for these for thousands of years, and now they're finally here. We need to go do what we're supposed to do. And the Valar are not necessarily convinced. Some of them are still like, I mean, protect them, baby them. What? I don't know. I really don't know what we're supposed to do. What are we supposed to do? Like, go over there and just grab all of them and drag them over here? And Orome's like, that would be one thing, but maybe we could go kill Melkor. And they're like, oh, now, hold now. No, we can't do that. That dude's big and scary. He's got a lot of power, and this would take a concerted effort from all of us to go get rid of this guy. And Orome gets a little ticked. I think you're mixing things up. The Eldar are Warhammer 40k space elves, not Tolkien elves. You wonder where they got the word from? So, Orome gets a little ticked. And he goes, okay, how about this? You bunch of frou-frou Valar, you sit around and debate what you want to do. I'm going to go back and protect the elves, and if I have to go by myself, so be it. And they're like, well, we can't make up our minds on what we want to do, so yeah, if you want to go back, you go back. So he goes back by himself, and he spends some times with the elves, and he starts talking about the Blessed Land and the home that the gods had created for the elves, and he explains about the history. And during these years, that, by the way, they debate for 4 years on what they're exactly going to do to help out the elves. And you thought getting something through the United States government was a hard thing to do. Hey, Cave, what's up? Tolkien borrowed from 40k. Okay, so Orome's back over hanging out with the Eldar, and he's teaching them a lot of stuff, and they are appreciating that he's not the big bad guy. He tells them about Melkor, he tells them about his powers and his witchcraft and all this stuff. And after 4 years of debating, the Valar do finally come to the decision that it's time to go take it to Melkor. And this is going to be a big old fight. And it's called the Battle of the Powers. And I'm going to have to come back down in font size again. The Battle of the Powers. This is going to be a big bad one. Absolutely, this is clear. Tolkien scholars seem pointless if you're not going to have Warhammer scholars. I have never claimed to be a Tolkien scholar. I know a lot about it. I'm very excited to talk about this stuff. It does not take me very long to prep this at all. But I am not a Tolkien scholar. There are people that have spent a lot more time studying this than I have. So, what ends up happening here is the Valar decide to basically load up everything. All of the Valar are going to go, and all of the Maiar are going to go. The Maiar are helper spirits, what we might call demigods or angelic beings. So effectively, all of the good guys are going to pack up and go over to take out Melkor. And they set upon him in the northern part of Middle-earth, and he is caught completely unawares. They managed to set upon him so violently that many of Melkor's followers and, underlings not just flee, but flee and hide. So they're not just scattering his forces, they're like running them out underground. And this is a pretty big just blow against Melkor's power to begin with, because it kind of shows that he was not as powerful as he thought. The fear of him was not equal to the fear of the combined might of the Valar and Maiar. And all of his little lackeys would rather go save their own necks than try to stand with him. So Melkor, at this fierce onset, is going to run and hide in his big superpower. Flee and hide is your favorite brand of shampoo. So this is Utumno. Utumno is Melkor's Palace of Dread. And he flees into Utumno, which is a powerful fortress, as we see here. And the might of the Valar and Maiar are not sufficient to break in. Autumno, you're sitting on Airbnb. Yeah. The great thing about it is you don't have to pay anything to stay there. And you can stay for as long as the host will allow you, which is sometimes thousands of years. So Utumno, big old bad, scary place. And so instead of deciding that they're going to chase him into Utumno, where they don't know what is waiting for them, they decide to lay siege to Utumno. And so the Valar and the Maiar ring about the castle, and they lay a siege for 7 years, which is basically them trying to wait Melkor out. They say, and remember, Melkor had been with the Valar since the beginning. He was the first created being. So he was like them, and they had a likeness with him, and he was not always evil, and deep in their hearts, they thought that he could be redeemed. So they didn't want to just break in and kill him. Instead, they're going to wait him out and try to let him come to his senses. You know that's not going to work. However, in this 7-year period of time, some of those evil creatures that had initially fled start crawling out of their hidey holes. And so the Valar are going to send some of the Maiar and potentially Arome. We don't know 100% if Arome went or not. They sent them down to protect the elves because they did not want these evil beings to harass the elves while nobody was watching. And if we look at what the elves describe this as, they basically describe this period of time as this period of horror where the earth shook and the northern sky was red with fire, and there was lightning cracking, and the booms from the lightning shook the earth. So this is freaky, scary, powerful stuff that the elves are trying to, understand. Again, they had only ever met one of the Valar. They did not know how many more of them out there, and Orome wasn't running around, slinging the lightning bolts and scaring the crap out of them. He was trying to be friends with them. So this is a pretty scary time for the elves, which is kind of a pretty scary thing if you think about it. At this point you've been aware maybe a couple hundred years, and you're the elves, by the way, are immortal beings, but that doesn't mean they can't die. Elves can die in battle, they can be slain, or elves can waste away, meaning that they basically give up the will to live, and they can pass away from sorrow and sadness. And they can die of COVID. It's hard to kill an elf with sickness. They are technically outside of the power of sickness to affect them. So they don't need vaccinations. They have really good built-in immune systems. Got my first shot yesterday, and my arm still feels like someone punched me with a nice slug to the shoulder right here. But it's better than the alternative. I'm not complaining. Anyway, so after this 7-year-long siege, the Valar figure out he's not coming out. He's going to stay in there forever. We're going to have to go get him. And this is scary stuff because they decide basically to rip up the whole line of mountains. The fortress of Autumno was in something called the Iron Mountains, and they decide they're going to dig up the Iron Mountains down to the ground level, and they're going to unroof all of his hidey holes and his secret places. They're going to root him out, literally. And this is called the Breaking of Autumno. And the Valar start digging through the mountains, and Melkor just keeps fleeing deeper and deeper and deeper. And eventually he gets down to the lowest of the low dungeons. And this is a very, very strong place, a place of a lot of power for him, a place where he was sort of in the seat of his strength. And at this point, his arch nemesis is going to arrive. His arch nemesis is one of the Valar named Tulkas, who is this guy. Tulkas is the champion of the Valar. He had initially, when he first came down to creation, he came down laughing, specifically because he knew that he was going to fight Melkor, and Melkor got so scared of this guy that he literally left creation. He went into he went beyond the walls of night into effectively what would be kind of like the void, because he was so scared of Tulkas. So Tulkas, this giant buff Tulkas, is Tolkien's way of putting himself in the story. No, it's it's spelled differently. It is spelled like this: Tulkas. Yeah, so Tulkas goes down into this final dungeon, the last level of the dungeon, if you will, and he's going to fight the boss one-on-one. And he is so strong that he overcomes Melkor and drags him out of the remnants of Autumno. And at that point, the Valar decide that Melkor is just too sneaky to let go. Tulkas, totally different. I mean, it's different vowels. So the smith of the gods, Aula, makes a giant chain called Anganor, which is the chain of fate, and basically binds Melkor in this unbreakable chain. And Tolkien got a little overboard. In some of the versions, like, he has names for the hand clamps and names for the shin clamp, or the ankle clamps, and names for the chain. In Tolkien form, he names everything. But this is a special chain because it's made out of unknown materials that only Aula knew how to work, so Melkor could not break them. You need to start naming all of your accessories. Name your belt, name your shoelaces, name your wallet. Yep. So Anganor, it is what they bind Melkor with, and while they're binding Melkor, out of the deepest little hole scurries one last little rat. And that little rat is Sauron. Because it turns out that Sauron was hiding down in Autumno with Melkor, and he manages to escape. And he runs away to another hidden fortress called Angband, and he's going to start trying to put together some of the scattered forces of Melkor, because he wants to potentially take over for himself if Melkor can't be freed, or maybe lead a venture to release Melkor. They're all made of unknown materials. I could look at the label and know, but what would be the fun in that? No, specifically here, I should have perhaps said secret materials, because Aula... the thing about Melkor is that he knew a portion of what all of the other Valar knew. So if he had made... if Aula had made the chain with materials that Melkor was familiar with, Melkor would have known how to break them. But because Aula used secret knowledge that he had developed on his own that Melkor did not have, Melkor was bound by the chain and was not allowed to escape. So, around 1100, in the Year of the Trees, Melkor is going to get dragged back to the Blessed Realm. And they're going to put him on trial, and they're going to find him guilty. And they're going to decide that his punishment is to spend 3 ages of the earth in the halls of Mandos. Now, Mandos is one of the Valar, and he was the Lord of Doom. And again, Doom here doesn't mean like death. It means what happens and what's going to happen. And Mandos and the halls of Mandos are the locations in... it is the location in the created world of Tolkien where the spirits of the elves go after they die. So effectively, this is a place where there's a lot of reflection. This is a place where there is a lot of time. So this was designed to basically let Melkor reflect on all that he had done and tried to kind of rehabilitate him, if you will. Sounds boring, right? Go think about what you did. Stay in the corner and don't come out until you are ready to apologize. So the elves are being protected at this point, but the Valar have to decide what's going to happen to the elves. And the Valar are going to try to root out all of the rest of Melkor's servants, all of the orcs and the evil spirits. They try to find Sauron. They want to sort of bring all of this to a close in one big pass, but they can't. Melkor had devised a lot of hidden places that were very secret and deep under mountains and had lots of passageways underground. Spent about 9,000 with dead Elrons. I, as a lore master myself, I don't know, could I call myself a lore master? As one of the learned, I would not mind a lot of time with Elrond. I think that would be awesome. But how could they put him on trial for something he did when he was in power, when he's no longer in power? Oh, Joey, I see what you did there. I see what you did there. And the answer is that if you did it, it doesn't matter if you're in power or not. You should still be held responsible for what you did, right? Right? Alas. That was a good one. Okay, so the Valar are trying to find all these bad guys. They can't, though. So they decide that the best thing that they can do for the elves is to transport them to the Blessed Realm, to Valinor. Valinor is the land Valinor. You would think that at this point my computer would know all of these Tolkien words. Valinor, this is where the gods lived. So they're going to go find the elves. They're going to bring them to Valinor, and they're going to be able to protect them there because, you know, they're right next to each other. They're not way across the earth. And I don't know if you all have ever seen the map of the First Age. So let's take a moment here to talk a little bit about maps. And I know that Cave Geek is going to be like, somebody said maps? So let's put this into a little bit of perspective here. Okay, so if you've seen the map of Lord of the Rings, that is a map of the world in the third age of the world. So all of the stuff that we are talking about now is in the first age of the world. And the world does not look the same at all. So if we look over here, this is Cuivennen, and these are the wild woods where the elves first wake up. So this is where they are living and hanging out. Utumno is up here in these Iron Mountains. Right? And across this sea is the plain of Valinor, where the gods live, mostly right around over here. So the plan is to bring the elves from this side of the world across the continent here, and then across the ocean to have them live over here. This is a big journey. This is a pretty long way. And the elves, when they hear about what the Valar have planned, are sort of afraid of this, because this is a lot of stuff that they did not understand how big the world was. They don't know exactly what they're getting into. They know that the Valar were the ones that were shaking the earth and overturning mountains and causing fire and lightning in the sky. And they go, do we really want to? I mean, like, if those guys got mad, they could just like and squish us. Do we really want to go? So the Valar send Orome back over. And Orome is the Valar that has the most in common and the most friendship with the elves. And they decide on a bit of a compromise. So what's going to happen is that the elves are going to pick from themselves 3 leaders. And these are going to be one from each of the branches of the elves. So the Minyar, the Tatyar, and the Nelyar, each is going to pick one of their kings. And these are going to be sent as ambassadors. So they're going to travel with Orome over to the land of Valinor. And they're going to, kind of talk with the gods and see what's going on. And then they're going to come back and tell everybody what's up. So these are going to be the first high kings of the groups of the elves. And the first one is named Ingwe. Ingwe is the lord of the Minyar. That's the map. Hold on a second. Let me get off the map. And I need to go find Ingwe. Here we go. This is, again, a depiction of Ingwe. We don't know for sure what he looked like. Tolkien never drew a picture of Ingwe, but there you go. Again, the Minyar are the smallest group. They're also the first group, and Ingwe is their king. The second group, the Tatyar, their king is called Finwë. And Finwë looks like this, which I think is an excellent image. Finwë, king of the Tatyar. Interesting, Ingwe means leopard in several African languages. Huh. That is interesting. I wonder if Tolkien knew that. I would not be surprised if he did. That seems like something that would kind of be right up his alley. Like, oh, wait, I'm going to use crazy words that nobody here would know, but that I know. And I don't mean that African languages are crazy, just that to British readers of fantasy, that would have been a language not necessarily in their repertoire. And the Nelyar, the third group, are going to choose Elwë. And Elwë looks, if I can get all of my photos set up the right way, looks like this. Elwë. So Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. These are the Elven ambassadors, and they are going to go over to Valinor, and they're going to meet the gods. And this is a pretty important moment because, again, remember that the Valar had never seen the elves themselves. This is the first time that they're actually, getting to see the elves. And when they enter the blessed realm of Aman, the realm of the gods, and they go to meet with the gods, it is described that this changes their countenance. This makes them look higher. They gain a lordliness and a power and a keenness of the eye because they had, just by being exposed to the wisdom and power of the gods, become more wise and powerful themselves. Gonna pop a pizza in Sauron, your new named oven. Hey Gypsy, how's it going? We are learning history of Middle-earth. So this is all the stuff in Tolkien's world. This is stuff that I'm doing as a giveaway sort of bonus stream stuff for my audience because we hit 400 followers, and we'll be doing History of Middle-earth as a reward every 100 followers after that. So if you're hanging out and you want to see more of this stuff and you're not following already, you can hit that follow button. And we will have all sorts of good times there. So, for some reason, the elves that go out on the journey are going to, well, we know what the reason is. The reason is that they became exposed to the knowledge and the power of the gods, so they become more lordly themselves. And they are going to go back to their people across the world over in Middle-earth. And as soon as they show up, everybody recognizes that they are different. They are like, oh, wow, like you guys are now like super powerful. And this is when they become the actual kings. First, they were just ambassadors. Now they're kings. And some people at this point might be going, well, what's up? What about Emin and Tata? And, what about the first 6? Where are they? And this is the interesting part here. And one of the reasons why a lot of people that are like legitimate Tolkien scholars think that the first 6 elves is a bit of folklore is because at this point they should still technically be alive, unless the elves' lifespan is different once they become exposed to the powers of the Valar. It gets into a lot of questionable stuff. But one of the easiest things to do is, like, why didn't they pick the first 3 elven men to be the ambassadors? And the easiest way to explain that is, well, maybe Emin and Eminye and Tata and Tatier and Elmen and Elinye, maybe they're just like, they're folklore. And these are the elves trying to explain where they came about. Maybe. But we don't know. So here's the deal. These 3 come back. They get picked as kings. And they say, oh, everybody, we should totally do this. We should totally go over to the Blessed Realm. It's flippin' awesome. There's like crazy light over there. There are these magical cool trees. There are the gods all over the place. Everything is super peaceful. No evil spirits, no torments in the woods. We totally have to go. And this convinces some of the elves. It does not convince all of the elves. Half of the Tatyar and half of the Nelyar decide they're not going to leave. And this is what we call the first sundering. And I know that just rolled down. I don't know why. So this is the first sundering of the elves. But because at this point, there are going to be elves in multiple locations. And half of the Tatyar and half of the Nelyar decide, no, we're not leaving. We're going to stay here around the lake. This is what we love. We enjoy the stars. We enjoy the lake, the woods. This is our home. This is everything that we've ever known. So you all go do your thing, but we're not going to go. And at this point, the elves give them a name, and that is the Avari. Avari means the unwilling. So these are going to be the elves that refuse to go with the gods over to the Blessed Realm. And they pick leaders amongst themselves, two elves named Morway and Nurway, who basically never get mentioned again. But the Avari are going to continue. And the thing is, we really don't know too terribly much about what happens to these elves. There is some evidence that they all ended up kind of getting destroyed by Melkor and his baddies. Some of them may have been captured and orcified, if you will, or they could have just stayed there until forever. They might still be over there now. We don't know. But a lot of them are basically never heard from again, because the majority of the elves are going to take up the Great Journey, and they're going to start moving off to the west. Now, one of the things that gets brought as a gift to the elves is something that you might have heard of before. It's called Limbus. And you're like, wait, is it the same Limbus? It is the same Limbus. Limbus is made from a mix of certain ingredients, including a specific type of corn that the Valar goddess Yavanna grew over in the ancient world, the Blessed Realm. And she had made some to give to Orome, so that when he went to help the elves travel, they would be sustained on their journey. This is the first time we actually see Limbus chronologically. And the way that it's explained is that the elves find the sustaining properties of Limbus to be somewhat magical, and some of the women of the Elven race, once they get to the Blessed Realm, are going to learn from Yavanna how to make Limbus. And this is actually considered a fairly high rank. If you are a Limbus baker, you are accounted high as a lady in the Elven world. Now, there are a couple of others that know how to do this, especially a Maiar named Melion, who used to be one of Yavanna's Maiar. And we'll talk about her in just a little bit. So they get Limbus. This is to sustain them on their journey, and they start moving off to the west. And at this point, there is going to be a lot of fancy technical language. And you go, what do you mean, Shane? Aren't all of these weird words made up already? And aren't all of these things hard to pronounce and remember in the first place? Probably so. Because, well, let's just be honest, Tolkien was a brilliant guy and could keep all this straight in his head. And, I mean, most people don't have any reason to hold on to this kind of stuff. I don't know why it's stuck in my brain, other than I'm just a really big nerd. And I'm completely comfortable with that, so, you know. But what we're about to start seeing here is a breakdown of kind of ethnographic proportion. And the breaking up of all of these elves is going to start having a lot in common with ethnographic research. And one of the things that is happening a lot in the time period that Tolkien is writing, the early 1900s, you start seeing a lot of science and a lot of pseudoscience, stuff like eugenics, where everybody's trying to chart the history of their people group, who came from where and what came from where. And it's pretty clear that Tolkien is really interested in this stuff because his writing is chock full of it. So, the Minyar, if you'll remember the first group, Minyar, they're going to have their name changed, and they're now going to be called the Vanyar. And you're like, why? Because they're just going to change their name. That's okay. So we're not going to say Minyar anymore. We're going to say Vanyar. but they're still the smallest group, and they're still the first group. Yeah, they're rebranding. They are rebranding after moving their headquarters. How about that? So the Tatyar that go on the journey are now going to be called Noldor. And the Tatyar that remain behind are not going to be called Tatyar anymore. They're all going to be Avari, those unwilling to go. Okay. And the Nelyar that go are now going to be called the Teleri. And some people that are very well read on Tolkien might be following all of this stuff. Like, oh yeah, I know the Noldor and the Teleri. Does Tolkien attach meaning to these names? He does. So the first ones, like Minyar and Tatyar and Nelyar, the tribes are first tribe, second tribe, third tribe. Kind of basically. All of his words and all of his titles can be translated into English. Whether or not we have a guess at what they are, or whether or not he directly gave us what they are, is sometimes sketchy. Like sometimes people have to infer. Like there are Elven grammaticists that look at words that he does not define and tries to pick out elements like, oh, this has ang, and we know that in Elven ang means iron. So these are the Angyar. These are the people of iron. That kind of stuff. And I just proved how big of a nerd I was because I know Elven vocabulary, but such is life. Hey, Graythar, what's up? Welcome. So, in general, there are also terms for the elves that go and the elves that stay. So, the elves that go call themselves the Calaquendi. That is a surprise. I wouldn't believe that. Oh, that I'm a giant nerd? So, in their own language, they call themselves the Calaquendi. So, Quendi is elves. Cala is their word for light. So, Calaquendi, the elves of the light. And now you're learning Elven vocabulary. Now, the elves that stay are going to be the elves of darkness, and they're called Moraquendi. And you go, okay, wait a second. I know something that also has Mori in it. So if Mori means darkness, what does Moria mean? And it means the pit of darkness, or black pit. But also Mordor, the land of darkness. And now you're learning Elven. And you didn't even want to. Or I don't know, maybe some of you did, but I could give you a lot more. Morannon, the gate to get into Mordor, through which one does not simply walk. Morannon means the black gate. Ba-dum-bum. Just like Saranon means the gate stream, which is the stream that runs beside the gate to Moria. And now you're really getting a little bit annoyed at how many of the proper names that I know from Lord of the Rings. This is why people no longer watch the movies with me, because I can get a bit overbearing. Like, I know the name of that hill. I know the name of that sword. I know the name of that horse. Yeah. It is what it is. Okay, so we pack up. We've got the Vanyar. We've got half of the Noldor. We've got half of the Teleri, and we're moving. Now, the Teleri are the largest group, because half of them would still be more than everybody else. Pretty good. New keyboard arrived. Oh, yeah, you knew to. Name the successor, pretty quiet, even more than you assumed. Nice. Okay, so let's talk about the Teleri. They're the largest group, and as they go, they're going to split several times. So as they're trekking across this giant chunk of Middle Earth, there are going to be a few periods of time where the Teleri are going to leave some of their friends behind. And the first check is at the Mountains of Mist, or the Misty Mountains. And those are this big branch right here. So some of the Teleri pack up, they make it around the inland sea, and they get to the line of this mountain range, and they go, oh man, mountains are where the big bad guy lived. I don't think I want to cross these mountains. And that makes sense. Some people aren't climbers. They don't really want to necessarily, hang out forever. They don't like the idea that they're going to have to climb giant mountains anyway. So some of them at the Misty Mountains decide to go back. They turn away and they go back, and they are called the Nandor. And that is those who return, or those who go back. And they are not counted amongst the Elves of the Light because they never see the light of the trees. They never get all the way over. But mountains, Gandalf, mountains, exactly. But they're like, I don't want to go up the mountains. Or those who are quitters. That might be a bit harsh. Those who go back. So we'll talk about the Nandor a little bit again at the very tail end of our discussion today. Because some of them do decide to buck up and actually go on over. Now, some of them cross this area, and some of them keep hanging on. Let me go back to my images. Okay, so they cross the Misty Mountains. They cross these mountains right here are called the Blue Mountains. And they enter a region called Beleriand. And if you read the Silmarillion or any of the stuff from the First or the Second Age, Beleriand here is described as effectively the most beautiful part of Middle-earth. It is full of lots of rivers and mountains. It is all sorts of lush and fertile. This region over here is called, you can't see where I'm pointing. This is Osiriand, the land of seven streams. Beleriand over here. So they've come across, they've crossed the Misty Mountains, they've crossed the region right here, which is called the Southern Forest, they've crossed the Blue Mountains, and now they are in Beleriand. And when they get to Beleriand, this is a really cool place. And one of the reasons why it's so cool, Beleriand. One of the reasons it's so cool is that prior to any of the stuff that was happening today, this is stuff that we covered in last stream, some of the Maiar of Yavanna had gone over to Middle-earth. They had left the Blessed Realm and gone over to Middle-earth, and they settled in Beleriand. And they began growing there all things that were beautiful. Beautiful trees and forests and meadows and flowers. They had tended the animals that lived there and the crops that lived there, and things are just super beautiful in Beleriand. And it's during this time when they are in Beleriand that the Lord Elwë, who is the Lord of the Teleri, he gets just absolutely fascinated by this region. So some of the elves are kind of camped, but he decides to go off wandering in the woods, which were, to him, the most beautiful woods that he had ever seen. More beautiful even than the land that they first came from, back around the lake of Cuivennen. And as he's walking through the woods, he is going to find Melian, who was sort of the chief Maya of Yavanna. So Yavanna is the Valar that's sort of over all things that grow, and Melian is like her chief deputy, a Maya of great power and increasing beauty. And it is said that upon locking eyes with each other, both Melian and Elwë fell so deeply entranced with each other that something literally magical happened. That the love between them that sprang up immediately was so great that it literally set them apart from the world. So if you've ever heard of I see the world in your eyes, this is kind of what they're talking about here, because they get locked in this moment where they stand so transfixed with each other that they literally fade from vision. And the rest of the Teleri start worrying about their king. Like, where did Elwë go? What's up with Elwë? And so they start looking for him. And they start wandering around and looking for this guy, and they can't find him anywhere. The story goes that one of them even walked within a hand's breadth from Elwë, but because of the magical gaze between Melion and Elwë, they could not be seen. I have a picture of Melion here that I can show you. Here we go. Melion, the queen. So at this point, the Valar start kind of getting a little bit impatient, and they're like, okay, so we need to kind of go. Let's go on with the journey. And some of the Teleri are like, dude, we're totally not leaving our lord. He's our king. She's okay, I guess. All right, like we're not leaving our lord here. There's no way we're going to leave. And Orome is like, okay, let's go look. We'll go look again. All right, so they start looking again, and they look for a while, and they look for a while, and they look for a while, and they can't find them. And eventually, Orome is like, we're going to go. Like, we have to go. And at that point, the Teleri are going to split again, because some of the Teleri refuse to leave. This is what's incredible about Tolkien fandom between the books, RPGs, movies, random fan art. We have art depicting even the most obscure characters. I agree. But Melion is not what I would consider an obscure character. She's a big deal. But I get what you're saying. Like, the people that recognize Melion are far fewer than the people that would recognize Frodo or Sam or Gandalf. Most people that have watched the Lord of the Rings movies have not even read the Silmarillion at all. And I'm not trying to cast aspersions here. I'm not saying, like, you guys aren't fans till you read the Silmarillion. That's not what I'm saying. But yeah, we have cool art of people, and I think that's amazing. But again, this is not what we might consider like official art. So if you think Melion looks differently, cool, go for it. So some of the Teleri are going to be left behind, and they become known as the Eglath, which means the Forsaken, because they are left because they refuse to stop looking for Elwë. This is a kind of a sad moment, because these were elves that had wanted to go over to Amon, that had, been willing to go, but they loved their lord so much that they weren't willing to give him up. So this is a little bit of a different sundering than the I don't want to cross the mountains elves. But the show must go on. The Eglath are forsaken. They are no longer... You love bacon and Eglath? Oh, that's unfortunate. So, got to keep going. Got to keep moving. Where are we going to go next? So they make it through Beleriand, and they get over here to the shoreline. And at that point, some of the elves go, oh man, what is up with this thing? And Orome's like, oh, that's the sea. And they're like, oh, that's so crazy cool. And there are beaches here, and there are shorebirds, and there are rocks that are great, and this is amazing. And Orome's like, yeah, just wait till you see what's across the ocean. And some of the Teleri, this is going to be the third sundering, by the way. Some of the Teleri go, it can't get any better than this. Like, yeah, this is the Token Beach episode. Like, it's not going to get any better than this. And so some of the Teleri decide, we're just going to hang here. And they become known as the Falathrim, or the people of the shore. And thus partying in Ibiza was invented. Hey, Hunk, what's up? Welcome, welcome. Yes, we will party in Ibiza. So, Falathrim. And I hope everybody's following all of these names now. How does the shirt that you're wearing apply to Middle Earth? Where's the Easter egg? There's not one. It's just a green shirt because I didn't want to wear something with a whole bunch of logo on it. I don't know. Maybe it's because it's green for the Lyquindi. How about that? There we go. We'll get to the Lyquindi. And you're like, wait, another group? Yes, more groups. Elves like green. They do like green. And Lyquindi are the green elves. We'll get there. So at this point, the Teleri have now broken themselves into kind of 4 groups. Do I own a wizard hat? I do not own a wizard hat. So Falathreme are the shore elves. Yeah, no problem. So continue. Where was Falafel going? The falafel thream. The people of the falafel. Oh, goodness. Graciousness. So, at this point, the Teleri have to make a decision. And some of them are going to go. Like, they have decided they are going to the Blessed Realm. And Elwë was lost to them. They had no idea where he was. They did not know that he was locked in a lover's gaze with Melion. So they decided that they were going to choose a new king for themselves. Schwaramain. Oh man, that's great. Goodness gracious. So the Teleri choose a new king for themselves, and his name is Olwë. And he looks like this guy. So this is Olwë, the new High King of the Teleri. Because it's time to go. It's time to set out on the journey. And you go, well, how do they get there? Can they fly? And the answer is no, of course they can't fly. Then how are they going to get across the ocean? Well, that's a great question. And it turns out that the gods had already thought about that. And time to go, okay, bye. So the god Olmo, or the Valar, or the Vala Olmo, is going to have a ship prepared, and the ship's name is Tol Eressëa, which is actually a big island. Inner tubes. Yeah, we're just going to get on the current and float all the way across the Sundering Seas. It'll take like a couple of days max, right? So Tol Eressëa, and if we're looking at the map here, you see this thing right here called Island Ferry. Well, that's Tol Eressëa, and it was parked right over here, but all of the elves are going to get on Tol Eressëa, and Olmo is going to move the island across the sea to just off the shores here of the Blessed Realm. This is pretty cool stuff. This is like the best Uber adventure ever. It's free, you're going to a much better place, and you're being escorted by gods. Pretty cool stuff, or if you don't say so myself. So, they get over to Amon, which is the land of the gods. And at this point, we get another fun name. The Teleri that actually made it all the way over are now going to be called the Falmari. The wave folk, the people who went over the waves. So now amongst the Teleri, we have the Eglath, we have the Falathreme, we have the Falmari. Some of them are Avari because they never actually left. And later we're going to have another group called the Sindar, but that's a whole other group. So all of these are Teleri, and you're like, how do you keep up with all of this stuff? The answer is, I don't know. You just kind of have to decide that you're going to learn it or not. So Falmari are the Teleri that make it. Their king is Olwë. Okay, so Olmo kind of parks the island of Tol Eressëa off the coast of Amon. And again, Amon is the Blessed Realm, and it looks like this. Boom. Okay, so If we're looking at this guy right here is Tol Eressëa. But you'll notice that that's not on the actual shore itself. And you go, well, how did they get over? Well, that had not been discussed yet. And Ulmo didn't really want to just pull the island all the way in, so there's a little bit of discussion about how they're going to get across the gap. And in the midst of the travel, the Teleri had become increasingly interested in this whole water stuff. This whole idea of building ships, perhaps. Things like it seems like a lot of work to pull an island. Yeah, well, I mean, remember though, he was the god of the ocean, so he could just kind of like, there we go. So some of the Teleri are going to start talking with Ulmo, and he tells them, "Oh yeah, there are things that I could show you how to build these vessels out of wood that we have here on the island, and you could build boats." And the Teleri are like, "Oh, that sounds amazing. Let's do that." Like Jason Momoa, Aqua Elf. I guess maybe. So some of the Teleri are going to build the first ships, and based on the descriptions, they carve the ships to look like swans. So they have kind of a longer body with a head that comes up and over that are shaped like swans, and they have sails and oars. And the Teleri move the Elves of Light, the Calaquendi, into the Blessed Realm. And this is going to be a big deal, because this is sort of like the Valar fulfilling one of the biggest duties that the creator god Iluvatar had laid upon them. This is them accomplishing one of like their top goals, right? This is bucket list kind of stuff. So when the Valar meet the groups of the elves, some of them are going to start making attachments pretty quickly. So let's talk about the Vanyar. Again, these are the smallest group. They are the descendants from the first group of elves, and they're going to be called the Light Elves, the Elves of Light, because a lot of them had fair-colored hair, blonde hair, and in later times when they, well, I don't want to spoil too much, but in later periods of time where fighting has to happen, the Vanyar are going to fight with spears, which are like rays of the sun. And the Vanyar are going to become very quickly the favorites of the sort of ruling pair of the Valar. So the king of the Valar is named Manwë, and his wife is called Vanya. And the Vanyar are going to really like Vanya. They're going to figure out that she was the responsible creator for the stars. One of the first things that the elves saw when they awoke was the stars. And in fact, Vanya had created the stars in preparation for the elves so that they did not wake up in darkness. And they have a really, really close relationship. So much so that they start calling her a new name. So instead of just calling her Vanya, they call her Elbereth. Which is, if you've seen, if you've read Lord of the Rings, you will know that Elbereth is a name spoken several times, both in song and as a password. So they really like Vanya. And Manwë is going to give them a part of Amon to build on. He's going to say, we want you all to live close to us, and there is a hill called Tuna. And there's an accent on the U, but this particular font doesn't have the accent marks. So the hill of Tuna. I don't know if Tuna's still around or not, but You have a hill named after you in Middle Earth. And the Vanyar and the second largest group, the Noldor, are going to build a shining city called Tirion. And it's going to be on the top of the hill. And initially, the Vanyar and the Noldor are going to live in Tirion together. And so this is a depiction of Tirion. Here we see the sort of white walls of the city, which reflect the rays of the sun, which doesn't actually exist at this point. This is a later picture. This is supposed to be Erendil, but we're not even close to him yet. But there's a big tower that's built here to survey the entire city and a lot of the Blessed Realm. And now, initially, the sort of lord of Tirion is going to be Ingwe, who is the leader and the king of the Vanyar. And he rules sort of in partnership with Finwë, the lord of the Noldor. But after a while, the city of Tuna itself seems to be just a little bit too far from Manwë and Vanya. And most of the Vanyar, including Ingwe, end up moving into sort of the palace of the gods. And that leaves Finwë as the lord of Tirion, the ruler of the great city Tirion. And that's going to be kind of an important thing for later because, well, things don't stay happy forever. I know I'm kind of spoiling the story. I don't know. Let's get a kind of a show of hands. If you have read the Silmarillion and remember any of it, say so in chat. I'd be interested to see how many people are familiar with the Silmarillion and kind of know where we're going. All right, so what about those Noldor? So the Noldor are the second largest group, and they are going to live here with the Vanyar to begin with, but eventually they're going to sort of take over Tirion, and they're going to become interested in making things. And that's going to bring them into a lot of contact with the god Aula, who is the smith god. And Aula is going to take a real liking to the Noldor. And the Noldor are going to be his right-hand elves. And from them are going to be lots of amazing works of creation built. We will talk about some of them in the next discussion, but some of the most famous items and things in all of Middle-earth are going to be created by the Noldor because they become so close with Aula that he starts showing them the secret things. The secret things that are basically held by only him as a god. Tuna has a tuna town on Tuna Hill next to Tuna Canyon. That's your OnlyFans page name, Tuna Canyon. Oh, you rapscallions. Okay, so the Noldor, being led by Finwë in the city of Tirion, hanging out with Aula, and there are some big people that get born during this period of time, but we'll talk about them later, including a guy named Fëanor, who's going to be one of the most famous elves ever. But what about those Teleri? What are they up to? Well, again, the Teleri are going to be very friendly with Ulmo, the god of the ocean. And this is going to bring them a lot of love of the sea. And if we remember, some of the Teleri loved the sea when they first saw it, and they're actually over on the coastline of Middle-earth still, the Falathrim, the people of the shore. And now we have the Teleri who have crossed over the waves, the Falari, and this is a big deal. I'm sorry, Falmari, blech, not Falari. So they love the water, and they're the boat makers and the ships makers. So they want to live on the sea. They want to live by the water. And so the Teleri build a great city called Alqualande. And it is basically right on the coastline. It is this enormous city that has a great lighthouse in it. And here is an image of Alqualande. Hey, Snowlock Holmes. This is your second time here. What are we talking about this time? So, Snowlock, we are doing a bonus stream. Normally, I do stream history, and we talk about historical stuff and things that have happened in the past. But I'm a giant Tolkien fan, and some of my viewers asked me to do History of Middle-earth and talk about the history of Tolkien's universe. So we are currently talking about stuff that happened way back at the beginning of Tolkien's universe. This is in around 1150 in the years of the trees of the First Age. It's about 8,000 years before Lord of the Rings, if that makes any difference to you. And this particular image that we're looking at is of Alqualande, which was the great city of the Teleri built on the shores of the Beliagar, the Sundering Sea. Really cool stuff. I really enjoy this, by the way. If you haven't figured it out, there's a lot of stuff in Tolkien's brain that he is so gracious to share with us. So Alqualande. Oh, that's supposed to be an O, not an A. Alqualande. And the font that I'm using here doesn't have all of the little grammar marks. So there's supposed to be an umlaut over this E. So it's not Alqualande, it's Alqualande. But there we go. So that is what the Blessed Realm is set up to do. It's set up as a home for the elves. When the elves arrive, they sort of pick their favorites and they build their cities and they live amongst the gods. But the story's not done. And of course, we know that there is a whole bunch of other stuff going on later on in the story, but we're not done today either, because we got to kind of pick back up with what's going on over in Middle-earth, because there are interesting developments happening over there. Most notably, that guy Elwë, who's the first and original lord of the Teleri. Eventually, he and Melion are going to break out of their magical vision, their magical gaze, and they're going to immediately recognize that they are in love, and they effectively just decide that they are married. At that point, he was the king and she was a Maya, so, I mean, nobody's going to gainsay them saying that they are married. So Elwë and Melion are going to become a married couple. And it's at this point that Elwë changes his name to Thingol. Or Elu Thingol, depending on how you want to look at it. And when they wake up and they sort of rouse themselves from their reverie, they find the rest of the elves, those Eglath, the Forsaken elves that were still hanging around Beleriand looking for them. And they're like, hey guys, what's up? And they're like, where have you been? Like, dude, we waited for you for years, and like, we've been looking for you for years. What happened? And he's like, I'm totally in love. Check out my wife. And she's like, hi, I'm a goddess. And they look at Elwë and they're like, dude, what happened to you? And he's like, love of a good woman, because Thingol, having spent so much time with a goddess, literally a goddess, had grown in stature, and he had approached the wisdom and the stature, what am I trying to say here, the strength of a Maya himself. Now, he's not completely a Maya, but he is a mighty lord. And he, among all of the Teleri of Middle-earth, had seen the light of the trees, because remember, he had been one of the original ambassadors, so he had seen the face of the gods. He had spent time personally with a goddess, and this makes him effectively the most powerful elf that's left alive in Middle-earth. And so when they find him, they're like, dude, you are clearly our leader. What do you want to do? And he's like, well, my wife came here. She loves this place of Beleriand. I fell in love with this place of Beleriand. We're just going to stay here. How about that? And we're going to make ourselves a kingdom here in Middle-earth. And so they do. And at this point, he begins to collect some of these other elven groups. There are the Eglath, the Forsaken. He finds them and adds them to his group. They're actually the first ones that he finds. He makes contact with the shore elves, those Teleri that had stayed on the shoreline of the sea, the Falathrim. And some of them recognize him as High Lord because, again, they're Teleri. They were originally following him in the first place. And some of them join his group. But if you'll remember, there was a group way back in the Great Journey portion that didn't cross the mountains. They stayed over here. The Nandor, those that turned back. Well, in that group, there came tidings that the Lord Elwë had been located and that he was living in Beleriand over here. And so some of those elves decided, oh, we've totally got to go and meet up with our Lord. We need to go and honor our oaths. So they're going to follow their Lord, who's a guy named Denethor. And you go, wait a second. I thought that was Faramir and Boromir's father. That's the same name, but the original Denethor was the leader of a group that become known as the Lyquindi, or the Green Elves. And now you know that Lai, L-A-I, is the Elven word for green. So Denethor brings the Lyquindi over. They meet up with Thengol, and he's immediately going to welcome them into his kingdom, and he founds the great kingdom of Doriath. And I've just clicked a button that I didn't mean to click, and stuff is happening on my computer. So let me get back over here. Doriath. Doriath is going to be one of the most powerful kingdoms of elves in all of Middle-earth. And at this point is the only kingdom of elves in Middle-earth that we know of. We don't really know what's going on with the rest of the Avari that are over back by Cuiviénen. We don't know too terribly much about the rest of the Nandor that refused to go over with Denethor. But this is a big deal, because at this point we have the foundation of elven kingdoms, and the elves are now basically all over the world. And the big bad guy is all chained up in prison. Melkor is stuck in the halls of Mandos, and the elves are going to have a bit of time to live in peace. Melkor is going to be chained for 2,900 years. And that's a nice time to set some stuff up and get some things going and build yourself some kingdoms and, have a nice go of things. And remember, the elves, again, they're immortal, so they don't have to worry about dying after 3,000 years or so. But that is where we're going to pause, because last time we paused on something bad with Melkor finding the elves. Let's pause with something good. We're going to pause with peace in the Middle-earth, peace in Aman. The elves, having found the gods and gaining wisdom and peace from them, the foundation of kingdoms, the making of ships, and the sunderings, which are going to come back together eventually and be all the more sweeter for the distance between them. But this is where we're going to pause and end up for History of Middle-earth stream number 3. But however, if you have any questions, now is the time to ask. But for timeline's sake, has Dwarven stuff been going on at this time? Yes. We can do an abbreviated version of Dwarven stuff. I don't want to do the whole thing of Dwarven stuff because I don't want to speed through it and cheat it. So if we remember from the second story, or the second History of Middle-earth, Aula, who was the Smith of the Gods, or the Smith of the Valar, created dwarves. And he did this because he was so anxious, and he was waiting for the first children. And Iluvatar, from outside of creation, saw him and saw that he had tried to make beings, and then confronted Aula. And Aula, recognizing his folly, tried to destroy the dwarves. And there were originally 7 of them. And Eru stopped him and said, "No, don't destroy them. I will give them the flame imperishable. I will give them sentience. But it's not time for them yet. They are not the firstborn children. The firstborn children are my children. They're going to be the elves, and they're coming soon." So what happened was Iluvatar took the original dwarves and put them to rest under a mountain and put them asleep. So the first lord of the dwarves is a guy named Durin, who is going to wake up around this period of time, roughly around the time that the elves are sort of first making contact with Orome. And he is going to wander by himself, and he is going to found the first great city of the dwarves with his own bare hands, called Khazad-dûm, or the Dwerodelf. And at that point, other dwarves began to awaken, and he establishes himself a kingdom in the Misty Mountains. They're later going to move over into the Blue Mountains as well. They're going to have several big cities, and they're going to eventually start trading with King Doriath, the king of Doriath, Thingol. So I don't want to rush through all of that stuff. So that's like an abbreviated ... version with lots of ellipses. We will cover the dwarves in a lot more detail on History of Middle-earth Part 4. Perhaps the short version. You remember Tom Bombadil from the book? We mentioned him last issue. Now are we reading comic books? We mentioned him in the last session, History of Middle-earth Part 2. So at a certain point after the creation of the stars by Yavanna, a group of the Maiar go to Beleriand, including Melion, the Maya who falls in love with Thingol. And at that point, they take up sort of residence in Beleriand and start doing a whole bunch of building and shaping and crafting and so on and so forth. If Tom Bombadil is a Maya, it is likely that he showed up during this period of time. We don't know if Tom Bombadil is a Maya, though. That's only one of the theories. We really don't know what Tom Bombadil is. He could be a Maya. He could be some other sort of spirit. But we don't know where he starts or where he ends. He's a bit of an enigma. And if you want to get a bunch of really, I guess, kind of really nerdy Tolkien people going around and getting them to argue with each other, bring up Tom Bombadil. You don't know any of these names, but you are intrigued. Sherlock Holmes, have you ever read Lord of the Rings? Tom Bombadil is in the first book, and then he's mentioned in the rest of them. But he's one of the first kind of adventurous people that the hobbits meet as they leave. If you've only seen the movies, you do not know who Tom Bombadil is because they left Tom Bombadil out of the movies. Most people do think, though, that Goldberry is a Maya of the water. It's been, so Tom Bombadil is in the 5th, 6th, 7th chapter of Fellowship of the Ring. He first finds the hobbits as they are being attacked by Old Man Willow, and then the next chapter is basically them at his house, and then he shows up again in the next chapter to save them from Barrow Wights and set them on the road to Bree. All these Maya. Yeah, I know. And I'm actually not even mentioning most of the Maya. There are lots and lots of them. So, any other questions? I'd be happy to chat Lord of the Rings. Anything that you all have, Hobbit questions, Tolkien questions in general, that kind of stuff. It's kind of right up my alley. Or you don't have to. I mean, we can be wrapping up. That's fine. I do want to remind everybody that the next History of Middle-earth stream is going to be based on follower goals. So we are currently at 412 followers. It means that we need 88 more to get to another History of Middle-earth stream. I don't know if I'm going to do another community goal. It depends on how fast things come in. I thought the community goal last time would take you all a lot longer, and then you burn through it in like 5 weeks. Speaking of being left out of Lord of the Rings, was there anything you were surprised was left out? Yeah. Basically everything after the crowning of Aragorn and going to the Havens at the end of Return of the King. They left out 3 chapters of the book, including one of the most important chapters, the Scouring of the Shire, which is one of the most important chapters in the entire story. Where did the wild men come in? It depends on which wild men you're talking about. There's the wild men of Brethel. There are the wild men of Dunland Fell. There are the wild men of the far west. It had even more endings. If you're talking about the wild men that are fighting with Sauron in Lord of the Rings, that group comes from the people that used to live between the Misty Mountains and the sea that were nominally part of the realm of Gondor, but they have their roots back in the Second Age of Middle-earth, when most of the Númenóreans had gone over to the island of Númenor and were living over there, and the majority of men in Middle-earth had sort of been left to their own devices and were kind of killing each other. You don't know how much of Lord of the Rings, but you do know someone who can rant for hours on why Sam is the real hero and how the movies do not do the book justice. Okay. So the Pupil Men. So they kind of come out of nowhere. And we don't know a whole bunch about those particular individuals other than we know like Gonburigan, who is their leader. We know that they live up in the mountains, the Woses. The theory that is sort of most commonly spread around is that they were originally men that were kind of opponents of the first realm of Gondor, because when the Númenóreans come back over to Middle-earth in the Second Age, they do so with a vengeance, and they don't really treat the people of Middle Earth very well after a while. Now, initially they do trade, and they're like, hey, look, we can teach these people and help them. But as the Numenorians got more prideful and their kings became more greedy, they started basically beating the junk out of everybody in Middle Earth. And that included attacking a whole bunch of people. So the thoughts are that some of the people that were originally inhabitants of the realm of Gondor ran up into the mountain forests to get away from the original Gondorians in the Second Age. And because they had been so isolated and kind of pushed away, that their kingdom eventually evaporated, and they sort of fell into inbreeding and living off of the land in a very, very primitive way, because it was either that or surrender to the Gondorians, which they did not really seem to be interested in doing. Are we going to archive the stream? Yes, we will be saving this. The first one and the second one are saved in the VODs, History of Middle-earth Part 1 and Part 2. So yeah, you can check this out as soon as I wrap it up. We'll definitely be keeping the VOD of this. So, oh, the Woses, Pukelmen. I love random stuff about Lord of the Rings. All right, anybody else have any questions? I will start looking for someone to raid. Somebody. Let's see. Okie dokie. So I'm not seeing any more questions, but if you have them, still let them in. But I'll go ahead and start doing the Color by Emmy. Oh, how am I not following Color by Emmy? Yeah, that's where we're going to go. We're totally going to go raid Emmy. Emmy is a great artist, a very cool person, cool to chat with. I can raid myself. So we're going to go raid Emmy. Thank you all so much for hanging out. If you are interested in more of these streams, send your people my way and tell them to click that follow button. It's free. I feel like I can ask people to do something that's free that only takes like a fraction of a calorie to do. I don't want to. I don't want to beg for money or anything like that. That's not my job. But if you are so inclined to hit that follow button and come see us when we do our normal stuff, we'll be around. Our next regularly scheduled stream is on Tuesday night. We are going to be doing a viewer request episode on colonial Australia. This is what the viewers wanted to talk about, so we're gonna go do that stuff. Sauron made pretty good pizza. Good stuff, Joey. I'm glad that it all came out the right way. So yeah, I'm gonna hit this button, and we're gonna go raid Emmy. Hang around, show Emmy some love. I'll probably hang around for just a bit to say hey. I don't actually know how I'm not following Emmy already. That seems to be a massive oversight on my part. So, all right, everybody. I will be back on Tuesday, 100% certain. There's a small chance that I might be back on later this afternoon or even maybe tomorrow to do some Gundam build stuff. I'm not 100% certain. So, a great pie wreathed in flame. 10 points for that. All right, everybody. Thank you all so much for hanging out. Thank you to all of our followers. This happened because of you all. And I really do mean that. I appreciate everybody hanging out and spending time listening to me ramble about stuff that is ultimately purely just my own alley. So we'll see everybody around. Have a good one, and see you next time.
much for the